here we go. Hello, so today I'll be talking about determinism and at least what I make of it or what I personally believe. I think that a lot of people want to believe that they have free will or they are in control. It is comforting, it is soothing. It helps people explain the choices that others make. But I have a different opinion on that, and I know an opinion, well, but I base my opinions on my capabilities and my understandings of what I make of the world around me. And, I could be wrong, you could be wrong, it doesn't matter in the end, but they're there anyway. So, what do I mean by determinism? It's actually somewhat of a complex idea, but it's simple in its execution. So, what it refers to basically is I believe that everything in the universe, in existence, happens in one singular way, and there's no other way that it could ever happen. There's no other way that anything in the entire existence could work any differently than the way it has been in this existence that we live in. Even something as small as a pebble or as large as an entire galaxy, it will never be in any other place or any other time than it has been. And that includes everything that you've ever done, your parents, their parents, every thought that you've had. You were always going to have that thought. Every action that you've taken, you were always going to take that action. And yeah, it's so how can I explain? So the idea is, if you rolled back to 5 minutes ago, the entire universe, right? Imagine it's like a cassette player. This is an analogy I like to use. Imagine it's a cassette player. For you that are maybe younger, imagine it's like a YouTube video, right? And you roll it back 5 minutes and you press play. Everything that happened would continue to happen exactly the way it did in that past 5 minutes. Nothing would change. Not a single thought you had in 5 minutes would change. Not a single action that happened in the last 5 minutes would change. Not a single drop of water would change to a different place or time. Everything in the entire universe would act out exactly how it did in the last 5 minutes. Because for anything to change, something past that has to change, right? Something has to be added onto it. If you went back with the knowledge that you just went back in time and you're now rewatching, this is new information. It didn't exist in the past, so it's not going to be the same. Things are going to be different because, or they can be. There's a possibility of things to be different because you now have new information. But we don't live in that kind of reality. You don't, time travel doesn't exist in that sense. You can't go back in time, right? So what happens is, if you roll back the time and you literally press to play, everything would act out the same. For something to change, the question is, why would it change? So if for example, in the last 5 minutes you were watching TV and you were scrolling through the channels, and you decided to pick on channel 5 instead of channel 6, why would you, if you went back in time, why would you pick channel 6 for no reason? Because you didn't pick it the first time around, and you roll back time and you just press start again. Nothing has changed in existence. Everything plays out exactly the same. So why would you change your opinion, your choice to go to channel 6 instead? Because if you were going to pick channel 6, you would have picked it the first time, right? If you didn't pick it the first time, you were never going to pick that, because that is the choice that you made. And of course, you might think, oh, there's no choice if there's no, if everything is determined, then there is no choice. But you do have a choice. It's just that whatever choices that you make, you were always going to make those choices. So the two can exist simultaneously. It doesn't cancel each other out. It's hard to conceptualize it. So, for example, if you're going to, and then this is in very human aspects. Like, obviously, this is a universal truth. It's not just bound to humanity and what your thoughts and what your actions are. It's like everything in the universe acts the same way. But I'm just talking about human behavior just to make it easier to understand. If you were going to, for example, just randomly scratch your head for no reason at all, and if you roll back 5 minutes and you play it again, you would still do that action. For you to not be able to do that action in the past, either there has to be complete randomness in our universe. So like, it doesn't matter how many times you roll back, it's just everything is completely random. Right? There is no order, it's just pure chaos and pure fiction. So nothing is true, right? So like, there is no, it's like, you got a hat with some ping pong balls in it, and you pull one out and it's like a giant pink elephant with wings, true to size. It's like, that's truly random. Nobody would expect. Or it's like a 1980s car. You just pulled it out. Didn't expect that. That was random. That would be a random thing. But if the things that we say as chance or pure coincidence and luck and things like that, they don't actually exist in reality. That's just the things that we put on, like the labels that we put on things that we don't quite understand how it got there or how it happened. We don't always understand how some things happen. For example, we don't understand when you're playing lottery that the numbers are completely, they're not by chance. They are predetermined numbers. They were always going to be those numbers that are chosen. Because imagine that if you slowed down time, it's conceptual. It's how we perceive things that makes us question that they are random, because our eyesight, our brain isn't fast enough to be on that level of our brains are not fast enough to comprehend things at the speed that is required to call it not random. So when we see there's like 50, 100 balls turning in this big machine, and one of them just gets plucked, we just say, oh, that was a completely random number, but it wasn't. It's just a time scale. Because if you really slow down time, and if you're a being that can perceive time in that way, every second is like a year, you would see that the balls are turning in a certain manner. And, when for example, the ball number 7 is on top of the machine, on top of the claw that picks the ball, it will hover there for a long, long time, right? Because you're perceiving time in a much slower reality than we do. So once you see that the claw is coming down and picking the ball, you would say, oh, of course, that was chosen. You guys rigged it, because that ball's been there for ages. It's been there for weeks. And, now you come and pick up the ball. Why didn't you pick up the ball last year when, the ball number 48 was hovering over the thing? Because you would perceive it in that way. But because we don't, because it's, for us, it happens in the split of a second, we just say, oh, that was just a random ball that was picked. It wasn't random. That's the thing. It wasn't random. It was, to us it was, but objectively it wasn't. As even if you pick up the ball with your hand, it's like your every motion, that once you put your hand inside, the way you swirled your hand around, the way you picked up one ball, dropped it, picked up another one, all of those things, if you slow down time enough and you looked at it objectively, you would think, of course, this was always going to be the ball that was chosen, because there was no other ball that could have been chosen in the actions that followed you picking that ball. Because it's hard to explain these things not being so articulate, because But for you to pick up a truly random number, it would have to be something that there is no logic. There is absolutely no logic that could be able to explain how that number came about. Because, for example, if you only had numbers 1 to 10 and you picked up number 2,851, it would be pretty weird. Like, that's just a random number. Why is that there? We didn't put that in. It appeared out of nowhere. That's random. But if you put 10 balls in the bag and you picked up number 5, that's not a random number. You've put those, whatever pebbles, balls in there, and you put your hand in. You did a very specific movement or shook the bag around very specifically, and then you picked one of those balls. If you rolled back 5 minutes, again, to use that 5-minute analogy, and you rolled it back, every single action that you took would be exactly the same. And the balls would end up exactly where they ended up in the bag, and you would pick up the exact same ball that you picked up 5 minutes ago. So things don't change in 5 minutes. So let's roll back 10 years then. If you rolled back the universe 10 years ago, nothing changed, everything is the same, and you just pressed play. Every single thing would happen exactly in the same order, same time, same place, everything. For anything in that existence to change, something prior to that, either something prior to that has to change, which we know it hadn't because nothing changed in your past, or there has to be true randomness in the universe for things to, whenever there is any replaying, things literally just don't make any sense. Everything just bounces everywhere. Reality is just a mush, and but we don't live in that reality. We don't just put our hands in the hat and pull out a Siberian train. That's just, things like that don't happen. We are orbiting around the sun. We don't just randomly orbit around Kinder Egg. It's nothing is like random in that sense. Everything is very logical. Everything makes sense. Everything is in a linear, almost like a rail track. And of course, we're experiencing time from A to B, B to C. We're going through phases, but it's like that analogy where you imagine an Olympic swimming pool, and from one end, the beginning is where you're born, and the other end of the swimming pool is where you die. And you dive in head first, and you start swimming all the way to the other end, and you're clutching, swimming, and then you reach the end, and you touch the wall, and you say, "There, I've experienced it from start to finish." But just like that swimming pool, which was always full of that water, you just experienced it at different times. Time itself is also a bit like that swimming pool, where the beginning and the end is existing in simultaneously. You're just experiencing it through a very linear path. So because you're only experiencing it one way, we're not fourth or fifth dimensional creatures, we can't see the full swimming pool. We can only see exactly the point that we are, and we can look back and see where we were, but we can't see what is in front of us. It's just like a blocked off for us. So just because we can't see the end of the swimming pool doesn't mean the swimming pool doesn't have an end, and the water volume is still there. Just because you can't physically touch the water at the end of the swimming pool doesn't mean it's not existing simultaneously as you're swimming. Because unless you want to claim that the swimming pool is literally coming into existence as you're swimming forward, the water is there, you're just not touching it yet. So that's just like time. It's always there. The time that the beginning of time and the end of time is in existence simultaneously. We're just living through our own little pieces of time periods in a linear fashion. We can't see what's ahead of us, but we can kind of see in our own tiny, insignificant way. We can see what was behind us. We only live 40, 60, 80 years, if you're lucky, 100. The universe is billions of years old, but we can just see in our own lifetimes, for example, the past. So, if the universe already exists in past and future, regardless of our personal, grievances, we think we're so significant, this, that, but, universe is very vast and we're very tiny. So if it exists, the past and the future exist simultaneously in one space, then that backs up even further the idea of determinism, because how you can't change the future if the future is already there. The future is already in existence simultaneously with the past. So you can't really change that. That's not changeable, because no amount of randomness can change what is in the future. Because if it did, the future couldn't exist simultaneously with the past. But it does. So if you rolled back time all the way to the beginning of universe, literally, if you believe it's the Big Bang, if you believe there was something before the Big Bang, let's just go with Big Bang for now. The microsecond, I'm sure there's a smaller time frame that you can use, but let's go with that. The microsecond that the Big Bang happened, if you rolled the clocks all the way back there and pressed play and just sat back and watched, every single thing in the universe, in the existence, would play out the exact same way with nothing that's different. Because again, the past and the future are already in existence. The deal has been done. The book has been written, and all we have to do is just swim through the time to find out. I mean, obviously, we're only here for a little time. We're a very, very new species in existence, and we're probably not going to be here long enough to see the end of the universe. But it's not only true in the universe's existence, but it's true in our own existence. And that's where it gets maybe a little spiritual. People always say, what is our purpose? What is this? What is that? Where we came from? Why we're here? It doesn't matter so much, because we just are, because we always were supposed to be. And there's nothing that you can do that will change how things were. And if the meteorite that never struck the Earth, if the dinosaurs didn't die out, would we exist? That meteorite was always going to hit the Earth. There's no reality. There is no existence in which that doesn't happen. For that to happen, scientists, they like to throw around this idea of multiverse. It's like, every time you make a choice, every time you make a new choice, there's an entire new universe that is born, literally, and in that universe, you are carrying on as this new choice. If you wanted a chocolate ice cream versus vanilla, and you said chocolate, now there's an entire new universe where you ate chocolate ice cream, and then there's another universe where you ate vanilla ice cream. That is just incredibly absurd. I mean, imagine something as menial as you, a human being on this planet, wanting chocolate ice cream versus vanilla. How vast is the universe? Like, imagine how vast the universe is and how small we are, right? If every time a single molecule literally moved to the next spot, to the next micro nanometer, if every time that happened there was an entire universe created, I mean, that's just what are they smoking? Really? The- Why would a new universe be created? Who creates this universe? Does it happen on its own? Is it like an on autopilot? No, it doesn't. There's no other universe. Well, there could be other, like what we call universe in after Big Bang. Imagine if that was like self-sustaining, ultimate galaxy encompassing space. There could be other universes, as in quotation marks. There could be other Big Bangs that happened in the vastness of the empty space that we live in. Is like we have the Milky Way galaxy, but there is like loads of other galaxies. There could be other universes where there are other galaxies and star systems and such. But it's not because we decided to have, or one person decided to have the vanilla milkshake versus a chocolate milkshake. That's not how it works. Your actions here change nothing. Even our closest rock from the moon. Your if you wanted to have if you wanted to wear a white dress versus a yellow flowery dress, that changes nothing on the moon. You think that's gonna like create an entire universe with billions of stars and galaxies and trillions of uh, planets? No, no, it's not. Stop like kidding yourself. So nature or nurture is another question, because you could say, well, if you grew up in uh, I don't know, a poor area, and all your friends and family were involved in crime, then you're going to commit crime. You weren't always going to make that choice. If you were born in a better neighborhood with better friends, maybe you would have ended up different, but you didn't end up different. That's the point. You were never going to end up different than the way you are. You were never going to have different feelings than the feelings that you had. And yes, like you're and it's not right to put it all onto nature or nurture. It's a bit of both. You are a human being, right? So your perceptions of the world is dependent on your five senses: your touch, your eye, sight, your smell, your taste, and also it's your logic, how your brain works. And that's where nurture comes in, because you could raise the same child. If you put it into one family and you raise it there, and then if you put him into another family and you raise them to a different country, different place, different socioeconomic status, everything. Those two versions of the same boy would be very different, even though he's limited by his human characteristics. You know, you weren't born as a different species. You weren't born as an alien life form on a different planet. You're born on this planet on a very specific time, very specific place, to a very specific family and surrounding friends, and maybe threats and things that, if you're born 10,000 years ago, you're going to have a very different view on life. You're going to have maybe different actions that you were going to take. Same person, you weren't going to have the beliefs that you have today. You weren't going to behave the way that you behave today. So yes, it is nurture as well as nature, because you're bound by your natural capabilities of what you're capable of feeling, what you're capable of thinking. Because you can't, if you don't have the brain capacity to think beyond, you can maximize, you can exercise your brain like you can exercise your body, you can maximize yourself, but at some point you're capped, you're hard capped by human anatomy. You can't be a supercomputer. It's just impossible as a human being, and you're gonna have to cope with that. You can't lift 10 tons with a single hand like a massive industrial crane. Your capabilities are your hindrances as well as your blessings. So because you're a human being, the things that you are capable of choosing, of doing, of thinking are limited to being a human being. And after that, you can modify that. I kind of, the analogy that I use is like almost like origami, right? You're given a piece of paper and you can fold it and mend it and turn it into whatever shape you want. You can make it into a dragon, a flower, a frog, a paper airplane, whatever you want. You can turn it into something, but you can't change the paper. You're given the paper. In that sense, life is like the paper that you're given. You're not allowed to change it. You're just dealt with the cards that you're dealt with. But you can make something with it. You can change it. You know, that's nurture. That's your environment, yourself. You can work on yourself. You can educate yourself. And you can make something with it. Now you'll say, you might say, okay, if fine, hard border is life, that's nature. You're given whatever you're given, your genetics, you're born from a certain family, your mom and dad. If you got two white European parents, you're probably not going to look like you're from Kenya. If you got two Japanese parents, you're probably not going to look like you're from Scandinavia. Fine, you're born with certain genetics. You're going to be taller, shorter, smarter, whatever. Maybe you're born with illnesses or diseases that you didn't have a choice in. All of that is nature. The nurture part, you can say, okay, gotcha. You can change things. Okay, you can change things, and that's why I said it exists simultaneously, because you can change things, but you're always going to change those things. You're always going to make the choices that you made. Because for you to make a different choice, again, something would have to change in your past, or there would have to be complete randomness. And I don't want to keep going in circles because I feel like I've made that point a few times, but I'm just trying to make sure that I'm portraying the idea properly in a few different angles, just to make sure that, it's understandable, because I'm not the most articulate person. There's probably a much better way to explain things, but it's just not going to be with me. So, yes, everything is predetermined. There is no such thing as free will as we know it, but we do have free will in a different sense, where everything, you can make any choice that you want. Right now you could choose to get up and start cleaning your house. That is a choice that you make. Or you could procrastinate. You could watch another YouTube video. That you do have the freedom to make that choice. You do. But it comes with the caveat of whatever choice you make, you were always going to make that choice. You were always going to choose it. So, yes, you do have freedom, but no, you don't. In the same sentence, it's a weird thing to actually. It's a weird thing to try to visualize. I know, and I tried my best to explain my understanding of it, my vision of it, but I don't know if I've been clear. So that also brings in two other things. That. And that is, one, if everything is predetermined, including all your thoughts and your actions, then what about like criminals? What about, if you kill someone, or, worse, there are many worse crimes. Are those people guilty? Are they, if it's predetermined, how can you hold them accountable? Because they didn't have a choice. If you didn't have a choice in the crime that you did, are you really guilty? So that's one question. And the second is, okay, if everything is predetermined, what's the point of living? We might as well just all die, because if I'm not living free, then what's the point? Okay, let's address the two of them. Is somebody a guilty even though everything is predetermined? Yes. And no. But mostly yes. So yes, because even though everything is predetermined, it is in the present your choice to do those things. Whatever ethical or legal crime that you committed, it is in your power still, because, and you know that, because, you can still make choices. It's not like you don't want to do something, but your body just moves like a robot and does things without you being in control, unless you're drunk or whatever. But even then, it's not. It doesn't work like that. But what happens is, yes, that person was always going to commit that crime. You know, he was always going to punch that dude in the face. He was always going to. That guy was always going to shoot the other guy. Whatever. All of those things were always going to happen from the existence of time. Anytime somebody hurt you, anytime somebody hurt your feelings, that it is kind of a little bit upsetting to know that from the very beginning of the universe, that was predetermined to happen. It is a little bit of a downer, if I can say that. But at the same time, it was their choice to do that. Even though they were always going to choose it, it was still their choice. It just happens that their choice was decided from the beginning of time. So yes, of course, you have to hold people accountable for their actions. But you also have to remember that even though it was their choice, at the back of your mind, that there is no other reality where something different happened. Because if there was that reality, we would be living in that reality, or we would see complete randomness, and we don't. And two, well, if everything is predetermined, which yes, it is, even though you have free choice, if everything is predetermined, what's the point of living? And I say, there's another analogy that people, I've heard people say, like, why do you watch a movie when you know it has an end? It's predetermined. You're not watching it thinking, oh, maybe this time the hero will save the town and, save himself. He won't die. No, the plot is predetermined. The plot is done. It's shot in the movie Hollywood studio. It's edited, it's put together, it's put in cinema. Nothing is going to change. The plot is predetermined, but you watch it. Why? You know the ending, right? Or you just, instead of watching the movie, just look at the ending. It's like, oh, okay, the guy saves the town and he dies. Okay, that's it. It's like Titanic. Oh, the ship sinks and the boy dies. Okay. Why do you watch the movie? You don't watch it because you want to get to the end. You watch it because you want to experience it. That's life. You want to experience life. That's the purpose of life. You want to experience it. That's why you should live. That's why you want to live. It's like that swimming pool. You don't, just because the other end of the swimming pool has an end, do you, like, when you go to swim, do you go, oh, the other end, there's a wall at the other end. There's no point swimming because I'm going to reach the other end anyway. It's like, okay, that's weird. Why would you? Is the point to get to the end, or is the point the journey? The journey is swimming from one end to the other, and that's why it makes no sense when people try to make the arguments. Oh, what's the point? I was like, that's exactly the point. The point is the journey. The point isn't going from A to B. It's the journey. Just like a movie, just like swimming, just like anything else. Another thing that I heard is, like, life is what happens when you're busy making plans, because, or life is what happens when you're going from A to B. And all those things are true. It's like, the end is not the goal. The journey is the goal, because the journey is the experience. And without the experience, yes, life has no meaning. Imagine you're born and you're dead simultaneously, which, technically you are. But imagine that you had no experience in life. Then what would the point of being alive be? Nothing. Because you wouldn't know what is a good or bad or positive or negative about being alive, because you haven't experienced, not a good thing, not a bad thing. So it makes no difference. If you have no experience, and it makes no difference if it happens or not. But because you have experiences in life, even though sometimes you might have a lot of bad experiences and not enough good experiences, that is still enough to keep you want to be alive, because that's what life is about. It's about going through it. Life is about going through it. And you can find a deeper meaning in life. You know, like, why are we here? Oh, I'm here to make a difference. Okay, that's your deeper personal meaning. That's a nice, comforting story, but it's not the reality. And I think we'll probably get into religion in the next episode, which, yes, I have some thoughts of, but of course, again, I'm not a expert in any of these. They're just my ramblings of existence, of being, of, you know, things that I can make sense of and I can't. And sometimes if I can't make sense of something, doesn't mean it's wrong. I might think it's wrong, but it might not be. It's all subjective. So I think determinism ties in well with religion and beliefs. So in the next episode, I'll delve into that and what I think and believe in spiritually. So thank you for tuning up, and I don't know if anybody is listening, but if you are, then, you know, type a comment if you agree, if you disagree, as long as you keep it respectful. I don't mind, you know, if you disagree with me or if you want to put in your own opinions. But yeah, even though I might disagree with you on some things, I still respect your opinions. I have them. I think it's very important to have freedom of speech and freedom of thought and opinions. And I respect your freedom to be wrong. So respect my freedom to be wrong as well, if I am in your opinion. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.